Something beneath our feet has been speaking without making a single sound. A creature so ancient it watched the ice retreat, watched giant animals vanish, and it is still here, alive, hidden, waiting to be noticed. It has no eyes, it has no voice, but it has been sending signals for almost 9,000 years, and no one listens. If this organism stops, an entire landscape collapses with it. And the most unsettling part is this: it has already begun to ask for help. Anyone driving along Highway 25 usually thinks they're crossing just another quiet stretch of Utah, the kind where the mind wanders without asking permission. But beneath those ordinary tires, there is something that doesn't fit into common sense: the largest hidden organism on the planet. The surface only shows the tip of the iceberg down below. A silent, largest living organism spreads as if it were waiting to be discovered. The story becomes even more intriguing when you learn that each trunk there isn't an independent tree. 'Tis a single being repeated thousands of times, a clonal colony with more than 47,000 clones sharing exactly the same DNA. A driver looks out the window and sees a forest, but underneath there is one identity. An organism so vast it challenges our perception of what it means to be alive. Researchers estimate that its roots travel nearly 7.5 miles underground, forming a root system network that spreads like an underground city. It is like driving over a creature that learned to survive for millennia without drawing attention. But this quiet giant is not as well as it appears at first glance. And it has been sending distress signals that almost no one notices. From a distance, Pando looks healthy, but looking closer reveals something strange. It is a city without children. Like an aging population that has lost its natural rhythm of renewal, the organism has stopped producing young shoots. This breaks the cycle that once guaranteed its survival and threatens the ancient superorganism that spreads across the valley. The comparison becomes even clearer when you place aerial images from 1939 and 2011 side by side. Where there was once vigor and expansion, now there are silent clearings. And much of this comes from a single detail: the reach of the deer population. With more than 300,000 deer and 77,000 elk moving through the region, every attempt at aspen grove regeneration is eaten before it even has a chance to grow. It is as if the forest has become a permanent buffet for hungry herbivores, stopping any real rebirth. But nature has already shown its own solution in another part of the United States, an experiment that changed entire landscapes. And once you understand what happened there, you start to see a possible path here too. When wolves returned to Yellowstone in 1995, no one imagined they would redefine the entire ecosystem. But that is exactly what happened. It wasn't just about the number of predators increasing, it was behavior changing. Suddenly, deer and elk began avoiding open areas, creating a landscape of fear that allowed young shoots to finally grow without being devoured. The phenomenon became so evident that researchers began using it as the classic example of a trophic cascade. Trees returned, rivers shifted their flow, birds came back. The power of a predator wasn't in its teeth, but in the psychological impact that reorganized the landscape. But this effect can't simply be copied in Utah. Human history, territory, and legislation make it unfeasible. That is why scientists turned to an unusual alternative: experimental fences that simulate the protection the fear of wolves would naturally create. Since 2013, the fenced areas have shown encouraging signs of recovery. But this solution also carries side effects no one predicted, and they are beginning to appear. The fences worked, maybe even too well. Inside them, the shoots grew freely without being eaten, creating a young, dense forest full of identical individuals. But this absolute protection created an unexpected problem: a vulnerable monoculture. Without the natural diversity of ages, every tree reacts the same way to environmental challenges. This is how the outbreak of cytospora cancer spread with frightening speed. In 2023, studies indicated that about 90% of the trees inside fenced areas already showed signs of the disease. An entire population getting sick at the same time is the perfect picture of something that has become an artificial zoo, not a real ecosystem. The organism protects itself, but without the resilience provided by natural aspen grove regeneration. It becomes dangerously exposed. And that reveals an uncomfortable dilemma. Protecting too much can open the door to weaknesses that were once balanced by the landscape itself. Pando looks healthy when no one gets too close, but inside it carries these silent illnesses. And what comes next is even more challenging, because it involves a force no fence can hold back. Since the year 2000, the American West has been facing a historic drought that has been draining the soil's vitality. Researchers point out that nearly half of this scenario is driven by recent warming, something even a Pando aspen thousands of years old was not prepared to face. Water disappears faster, heat lasts longer, and each shoot fights however it can to survive. But this is only the beginning of the storm. The second threat arrives when the seasons stop following their natural rhythm. Leaves sprout too early, triggered by unusual heat waves. Then they are destroyed by late frosts that catch everything off guard. For an organism accustomed to ice ages and slow changes, this speed is a brutal blow. Not to mention the confusing atmospheric signals that disrupt trophic cascade patterns and disorient behaviors in the surrounding ecosystem. The third threat is even more subtle. Irregular rainfall disrupts the chemical signals that guide when and where to invest energy. The ancient balance breaks, and the giant must make quick decisions in a world that has stopped being predictable. And when nature accelerates, even a being that survived ice, megafauna, and the passage of millennia feels the impact. But what truly worries researchers is something that cuts this organism in half, literally. Highway 25 may look like just another road on the map, but for Pando, it is a deep scar. A line of asphalt that splits one organism into parts that no longer fully communicate with each other. The underground connection still exists, but the flow is not the same. For a root system network this ancient, such fragmentation is a rupture it has never faced in its entire history. The result of this division is almost surreal. In one area where there is no protection at all, Pando is reduced to fragile shrubs constantly trimmed by herbivores. In the fully fenced sector, it forms a dense forest, but a sick, homogeneous, and vulnerable one. And in the partially protected zone, something hybrid emerges, an ecological limbo. It is like seeing three different personalities growing inside the same body. For the first time in roughly 80,000 years, this organism is losing its visual and functional unity, appearing as three different forests that are actually one. And the most astonishing part is that people driving along the road rarely notice the rupture. But while biology tries to reorganize itself, there is another challenge, one that does not come from nature, but from the very people who should protect it. While Pando tries to survive at the pace of millennia, human decisions follow the rhythm of annual meetings, forms, and disputes over responsibility. Forest Service, wildlife resources, county agencies. Each one holds a piece of the answer, but none hold the entire key. It is like trying to coordinate a clonal colony with departments that barely communicate. And in the meantime, the deer keep eating. The slowness becomes evident when you look at the budget. About $250,000 to expand the protection of an organism that covers 106 acres. It is barely enough to maintain a small urban park. The contrast becomes even sharper when we remember that more than 300,000 visitors cross the region every year without knowing they are stepping over the largest living organism on the planet. Invisible to the eyes, invisible to priorities. This conceptual invisibility creates a chain paralysis. While committees debate details for years, Pando responds in weeks, sometimes in days, trying to reallocate energy like an ancient superorganism that has no time to waste. But paradoxically, it also carries a subtle, deep evolutionary intelligence. And it is precisely this intelligence that reveals what may happen next. In 2024, researchers began noticing an intriguing pattern inside the Pando aspen. Some areas were sprouting vigorously, while others remained silent, even with identical conditions. It was as if the organism were strategically choosing where to invest energy. And this coordination didn't come from a brain, but from a root system network that works like a plant-based neural network spread beneath the ground. Scientists realized that Pando does not act like isolated trees competing with one another. It collaborates. When one area is under stress, another provides chemical and energetic support. When deer approach, sensors placed on GPS collars show how the pressure alters not only the animal's behavior, but also the response of the entire organism, a reaction similar to the landscape of fear observed in other ecosystems. Protected areas since 2013 reveal something surprising. Despite all external challenges, internal resilience remains intact. It is as if Pando were constantly recalculating routes, trying to adapt to a world faster than anything it has ever faced. But the final key to understanding its future, and perhaps ours, lies hidden in something even deeper: its own genetic memory. Pando's DNA carries marks from a time when the world was unrecognizable. Estimates suggest between 9,000 and 80,000 years of history encoded inside this organism. A span so vast, it includes the end of the last ice age and the presence of the giant megafauna that once roamed the continent. Every fragment of this genetic material holds chapters we never witnessed, yet they still influence its behavior today. This living memory works like an evolutionary library that humans have barely begun to decipher. Comparisons with other ancient species, such as bristlecone pines, strengthen the idea that there are ancient superorganisms capable of surviving entire eras without losing their identity. With modern analysis, scientists can confirm that the whole system is truly a single organism, something impossible to replicate artificially. And the most impressive part is realizing that by studying Pando, we also see traces of our own ecological past, survival patterns that shaped entire landscapes long before the first human settlements. It is rare, fragile, and irreplaceable knowledge. But there is an even more curious episode in this story: an accidental cut that ended up saving part of the organism without anyone planning it. In 1992, a timber company carried out a cut that was considered disastrous by the local population. The community protested, newspapers criticized it, and environmentalists called the act irresponsible. But what no one expected was that this accidental disturbance would become one of the most successful regeneration areas in the entire organism. A reminder that not everything that looks like destruction is actually loss. The secret lay in the temporary return of a natural pattern: periodic disturbances that were once common, like fire, wind, and disease. But that disappeared after 100 years of total fire suppression. Without this cycle, the forest accumulated fuel levels that studies indicate are the highest in the past 1,200 years. Curiously, that cut returned a spark of the dynamism Pando always relied on to survive. Today, researchers test controlled burns with extreme caution, trying to balance risk and benefit. It is an uncomfortable paradox. Protecting too much can be as dangerous as abandoning. The strongest regeneration happened exactly where intervention seemed like a mistake. And faced with all of this, the big question remains: how do you tell a story that began thousands of years ago and continues unfolding beneath our feet? Pando makes it clear that longevity does not mean invulnerability. It shows us that even the largest living organism can depend on human decisions made at the right time. The real question now is simple: are we acting fast enough? Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to keep learning about the invisible secrets that shape our planet.